Dave Parody here with another Slide Makeover video podcast based on the ideas in my book, The Visual Slide Revolution. Today's slide comes from a workshop that I did recently, and this was one of the slides that was in a presentation sent to me to say, hey Dave, see if there's anything in there that could be improved. And it is a slide that is typical in a number of presentations where we have to show calculations. And here's the original slide. What it is doing is it is explaining the methodology, meaning the way that they calculated certain figures. Now in this case it's a governmental type organization, and they have to report on how different students do in scoring on certain tests by ethnicity. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, how do we calculate whether this ethnicity is over or underrepresented at this percentile? And they go, essentially this is a paragraph that was taken from a report and simply split into bullet points. And I can't imagine that the presenter does anything except simply read it. The audience is reading at the same time, which my surveys have told us over and over again is the worst thing you can do. It's also very hard to try to understand. What I found later in the same presentation was this slide, which showed us actually the numbers going through this calculation, and there was slide after slide after slide because they were doing it for different grades, different types of tests, that sort of a thing. And it went on. I mean, there must have been a ton of slides on this. And again, it's overload for the audience going, whoa, what the heck? How do we understand this? So let me show you how I redid this slide to make it easier for people to understand how we're calculating some results before we actually present those results. Because if we don't tell people how we're going to do the calculations or how calculations have been done, then they won't understand the results when we actually present it. So it's very important to do this up front. Here's how I redid the slide. Now let's talk about the methodology for determining whether an ethnicity was over or underrepresented within a particular percentile. First, we look at the percentage of the ethnicity in the total number of students who took the test. So let's call that A. We'll call that A. And then we look at the percentage of the ethnicity who scored in that particular percentile category. So let's call that number B. So B minus A determines the difference in representation of this ethnicity in this percentile category. Now, if B minus A is negative, then it means underrepresentation of this ethnicity in this percentile. If B minus A is positive, it means overrepresentation. So let's look at a couple of examples. So if there were 70% of the students in the test who were of a particular ethnicity, and 46% of the students who scored in a particular percentile were of that ethnicity, we do B minus A, we get negative 24%. So since that's negative, it says that this ethnicity was underrepresented by 24% in this particular percentile category. Let's look at another example. If the percentage of students was 15% of this ethnicity in the total number of students who took the test, and in the defined percentile, 19% of the students in that percentile were of this ethnicity, then we do B minus A, and we get 19 minus 15 is plus 4, or 4%. Since that's positive, it's overrepresentation, meaning that in this percentile category, this particular ethnicity was overrepresented by 4%. So that's how I explained it, and it's far easier to see when we follow a few lessons. So let's look at some of the lessons when we're explaining the methodology or methods that we use to calculate some of the figures. First of all, please don't use paragraphs. That's for a report where people can go over it a number of times. Putting paragraphs in your presentation is just going to be extremely difficult for anybody to understand. Instead, use explanations. And I like the we'll call that A type explanation. So we say, here's an explanation of something. Now let's call that A. So people can put a label to it, a representation of it, and it's easier then to follow how we use that calculation later on. Once you've done the explanation, show the examples. Show some examples so that people can see how those explanations are applied with real data, or example data if that you want to use example data, but real data might be even more powerful. And make sure that you keep both the examples and the explanations, keep both of them on the same slide. If I had gone to a second slide, then I would have inevitably had people's hands go up and go, could you go back so we know what B is or A? Keep it all on the same slide. Then everybody has context. And if you send this these slides out for other people to look at later, they can always go back to that slide. Or if you've got a handout, they can always go back to that slide and quickly refer to, oh, okay, that's how the calculation is being done. Now I can interpret the data. So when you have to explain the method of your calculation, keep these lessons in mind. If you want more information on the book, go to www.visualsliderevolution.com for more information on my training, workshops, my consulting, videos, other resources. You can go to www.ThinkOutsideTheSlide.com. This has been Dave Parody with another Slide Makeover video podcast.